Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Rona McDaniels has a podcast. Yes. Oh, I've been waiting. I have been waiting. Oh my goodness, have been waiting. Yes, Rona McDaniels, the head of the RNC. I have been waiting. I have been waiting for her to tell me how wonderful Donald Trump has been to women. That's right. Rona could not wait in her very first podcast. Couldn't wait. Her new podcast to say just how wonderful. You're such a wonderful person. You've been so wonderful. The nose, very orange. A little brown, but orange. Because the orange kind of wears off. You go, is there no level these folks won't sink? No, truth is no. Because look, if they're not kissing up to the Orange Menace, they're, doing what the Gutfield guy over on that Fox channel's doing, which is wanting to argue about what they're seeing coming out of Ukraine, or the crazy woman on Twitter who's going, I think it's BS that, they're not really bombing those hospitals. There's a freaking hospital bombed. Whoa, wait a second. Hold on. When you bomb orphanages and you bomb children's hospitals and you bomb old age homes, who really benefits when you bomb those old age homes? You know who really benefits from that? The Ukrainians. They're the ones who benefit from it. Headline now. You can just see it. Breaking news. The Ukrainian government, live at 5, Zelensky caught dressing up in Chinese military outfit, driving an Iranian tank, running over an orphan child, film at 11. You can just see it right now, how insane that Fox channel is. It's all BS all the time. But you know what? Greg Gutfield's got four award-winning shows. And he'd be happy to tell you about him. He's still a giant POS, but, he's got 4 award-winning shows. Still a giant steaming. Yeah. And a lot of those folks over there, look, we're just saying what people are thinking. Yeah, horrible people. You're just saying what horrible people are thinking. Jen Psaki on the bombing of the children's hospital there in Mariupol, if I'm saying it right. It is horrifying to see the type of barbaric use of military force to go after innocent civilians in a sovereign country. Fox News response, I don't believe it. It's BS. Yeah, this is what you get. This is the kind of crazy, hey, it's their protected right. Free speech. So we find out today that, remember when Vladimir Putin said they weren't using conscripts to fight the war there? They weren't sending prisoners to go fight? Because here's the weird thing. They're recruiting in Syria. They're actually looking for people to come fight in Ukraine because they don't have enough people. But they've now, I guess, admitted that there are conscripts in there. Yes. Because evidently some of them have been taken prisoner. Oops. So you kind of can't deny that then? You can lie to a certain point? I guess you could just keep lying. I guess you just could. But the war for Putin not going well. Clearly not going well for the Ukrainian people either. Now they are fighting because they don't have a choice, and they are holding their own as they can, but they're being pummeled by a much more powerful, invading force, a murderous force. That is happening. No matter what you see on that channel over there with the F letter, and them, they are being just flattened Now here, all I've heard, gas prices. That's all everybody's talking about. Gas prices. All I've heard is Joe Biden's raising gas prices. And then I hear Joe Biden's buying Putin's gas. So it's Joe Biden's raising gas prices and he's buying Putin's gas. He's buying, and the second you go, well, no, wait a second. They're going to do something. Because if you're trying to explain, no, Biden doesn't actually buy the gas. It's ExxonMobil and Shell. That's way over people's head. Too complicated. Don't bother. Too wordy. So we've done something. Now prices are going to go up. It's making people crazy. So then they go, well, we should be drilling our own oil. We should be doing more. Joe Biden killed the Keystone Pipeline. No, didn't kill the Keystone Pipeline. Keystone Pipeline is actually working. That's actually coming down from Canada. It's the Keystone XL Pipeline. That was the part that kind of cut, because the Keystone Pipeline does like a 90-degree. They wanted to cut that. They wanted to do a 45 right through the country over one of the most pristine water supplies we have. Because here's the thing: if you're ticked off about paying $4.50, $5 a gallon for gas, wait till you're paying $20-$30 a gallon for water. Just wait. But I got into one of these kind of conversations back and forth over the cost of gas because of the Keystone Pipeline and the Keystone XL Pipeline, and you go, but hold on, it's still the shale gas is this sludge is still coming, it's still happening, it's just not coming through a pipeline, it's still coming on trains, it's still being trucked, it's not stopped. You do understand that, right? And this is what I think that people have forgotten. Understand that oil, the oil company didn't go, oh, well, we didn't get a pipeline? Oh, well, screw it. We're just going to leave it in the ground. Do you really think that's what they did? Does anybody believe that the oil company goes, oh, well, Joe Biden said no pipeline. We're just going to leave all this valuable stuff in the ground. Do you really believe that? Answer, no. Answer, nobody believes that. So what do? They put it in trucks. They put it on trains. They're going to figure out how to get it there. And what does that do? Oh, that creates jobs. Lots of jobs. Lots of jobs for people, for truck drivers. Aha. Those Canadian truck drivers who are angry about stuff? Yeah, them. Creates jobs for people who work in the truck stops. The people who, fuel and the people who fix trucks. Yeah, them. Also the waitresses and the waiters and the people who cook food. All those people. Yeah, them. All those people who would suffer from a giant pipeline? Well, other than the people who would get sick and die from the effects of the massive spills that come from these things. People who lose those jobs. Now, can you argue that having all that stuff on the road is probably worse than the pipeline? Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I argue we should be getting away from the dirty stuff anyway. The fact that we're talking about refining what is basically sludge, and that we don't even do here in the U.S., from what I understand. The reason that they wanted to build this, put it in the Keystone Pipeline and ship it down to Texas, is so they could get it somewhere else to refine it, because we don't even do that. This is that kind of nasty. This is that kind of ugly, that we don't even do it. But this is the talking point. And look, don't ruin a good talking point. No, not allowed to ruin a good talking point because, well, it's Joe Biden's fault. Because that's the default, right? It's all Joe Biden's fault. He's stopped drilling. If Donald Trump was still president. Here's the problem. And this is a big problem. Because facts really do kind of matter. Understand, facts do matter, even in the upside down world that we now live in. You had, Senator Marsha Blackburn, that train wreck. She said that, Joe Biden's the best defense we had against, Putin's evil vision for the world. Energy independence. We were there. We were energy independent for that 1 year when we were all locked up in our house and nobody was driving anywhere. We were energy independent. Here's the problem. The good folks over at the Center for Western Priorities, they went and looked at all the permits. The things that we give to those oil companies, that they go and they take those needles and they stick them in the ground, they extract that oil and gas out of the ground. The rights to go do this stuff, to steal the wealth from under our feet. Turns out, interestingly enough, and I know my liberal friends are going to be really ticked when they hear this. Turns out, this administration has been much more willing to hand out these oil and gas leases than the last administration had been in the 3 years that Trump, the first 3 years that the former guy was there. So they've given out more than the former guy did in 3 years. Now here's the thing. It could be, issuing more of these oil and gas leases to these industries, wouldn't even matter because they're not developing them. Now, you may remember there was a huge argument, huge hue and cry about the Arctic, area there, the Arctic drilling, Alaska, one of the most pristine places in the Arctic Wildlife Refuge over there in Alaska. Oh, such a beautiful place. But there's so much oil. So much oil. 1.1 million acres of pristine land. They were going to give out, parcels. There were 22 parcels. I guess 1.1 million acres of land. There were, 11.8 billion barrels of oil. Oh, they were going to lease. They were going to auction these off. It's going to be great. It's going to bring in lots of money. And the oil companies were salivating, supposedly. It was going to be, this is how the former administration was going to make us, energy independent. And everyone said, this is the answer to America's energy problems. And we fought for a long time to open this up. And finally, the Trump administration said, damn it, we're doing it. We're going to lead. Yeah? So they had an auction. They did. And last January, now this is again before Joe Biden was president, they had an auction. And take a wild guess how many people showed up for the giant auction. Come on, take a wild guess. Was it 1,000? Was it 10,000? Was it 1? Yeah, it was 1. It was 1. And do you know who that 1 was? It was the state of Alaska. What? The state of Alaska? Yeah, because the state of Alaska didn't want to be embarrassed that no one showed up to their auction. And they bought up the leases because someone had to. And why? Now, I have a friend who lives in Alaska, does a lot of work in Alaska, represents workers in Alaska. Explained it to me. Because I'll tell you, I was against the idea of drilling in one of the most pristine places in the world. I did not want to see one of the most beautiful places ruined by drilling. He said, look, the oil companies aren't going to spend the kind of money that it's going to take to get that stuff out of there. They're not. There's all kinds of infrastructure that has to be built. There's roads that have to be built in there. There's all kinds of investment that has to go in there that they just don't see how they're going to get out. And then all of the, you're talking, this is difficult land. This is a lot. And if the oil companies aren't willing to invest that in there, and they weren't, to get this 11 billion barrels, that the leases were there, they were available, and they were cheap. You go, but Joe Biden, wait a second, hold on. It was Joe Biden's fault. Joe Biden wasn't president yet. See, hold on. If those auctions would have gone and all those companies would have done what all of the conservatives are telling us that should have been done, because the leases are out there, folks. There are leases. There are tons of leases out there. There are so many leases out there that the oil companies are holding on to. We should be drowning in oil. Literally, if they were drilling the leases that they have, gas would be $1 a barrel. Oh, wait a second. That really wouldn't be a good idea, would it? Which brings me to the report by accountable.us last year that made me think about why we don't drill on all those leases. I wonder why we wouldn't drill all that oil. Something I learned in economics class a gazillion years ago, something about supply and demand. where if you have too much of something, it isn't worth much, but if you keep it scarce, price goes up. Yeah, something about that seems to play in my mind. And, last year, what this accountable.us pointed out is the top 24 oil and gas companies, they pocketed, pure profit, $174 billion between January and September. $174 billion. Exxon alone reported $6.9 billion in the third quarter alone. And you go, whoa, well, that's that. Well, 24 companies made $74 billion in profit. This is after everything. This is paying their workers. This is paying all of the politicians. This is paying all their lobbyists. This is doing all of those wonderful ads. Oh, how wonderful we are. Look at us washing the ducks and patting the little children and making smiley faces and doing all this. Look how wonderful we are. Sunny faces. Oh, goody. Yeah, all of that. And you go, but hold on, gas prices keep going up and their profits keep going up. But those analysts keep telling me, no, Rick, no. The CEOs and the oil companies, they're not jacking up the prices. Well, explain to me how their profits keep going skyrocketing while the prices keep going up. Hold on. Cause and effect. Causation doesn't necessarily, mean that's the effect. And I get that. But it seems curious, does seem curious. Now, I do find it interesting that today, the headline read, oil drops 12%, worst day since November, yet the local pump went up an extra nickel. Wasn't the worst day for us here. The worst day for us here was, it should have gone down, shouldn't it? And this is where having this be the kind of speculative market that it is, what we end up with is we lose. No matter what happens with the price of gas, working people get screwed. And that's just what it is. And this is why I'm glad to see that Sheldon Whitehouse, the good senator from Rhode Island, and Elizabeth Warren are right now working on a proposal to target these profits that these companies are posting right now and taxing corporate America. We need to be heavily taxing these oil companies and in a big way. And I've been saying for a long time, we need to be taxing corporate America at a much higher rate. And you go, oh, Rick, no, we can't tax corporate America because they use that to reinvest in their business. No, they don't. Stop thinking that way. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Stop it. Profits, they put in their pocket. That's what they do with profits. They take profits, they give it to their shareholders, they divvy it out, they keep it amongst themselves, they don't share. Especially not with you. And they don't reinvest their profits. What they reinvest is what they write off. So if the taxes were higher, think about this for a second. If their taxes were much higher, what would they do? They would try and evade paying taxes. And how would you avoid paying taxes if you had higher rates? You would invest in your business. So actually, if you stop and you think about it, a higher tax rate would actually lead to much higher investment into business and job creation. Which is why back in the 60s and in that era, you had much higher business investment. You had much higher investment in worker training and much more worker-centric things. Why? They didn't want to pay taxes to the federal government. Gee, I wonder why that was. But here's the thing. Blame Joe Biden. At the end of the day, the simple thing is blame Joe Biden. It's all blame Joe Biden. Because that's the Republican plan. Blame Joe Biden. And then divide and hate working people. That seems to be it. It really does. It seems to be all they've got. That's all it is. Blame Joe Biden and then divide and hate. You look at the fact that the only plan that they've come up with so far, you've got Ron Johnson who wants to destroy Obamacare. Yeah, that nonsense again. And Rick Scott, who now has a 11-point plan to reinvigorate the culture war so we can hate each other a lot more and then raise taxes on poor people. In fact, there was a report today in one of our local publications, the Pennsylvania Capital Star, that did an analysis of the Republican tax plan. And they say that it would raise taxes for 35% of Pennsylvania residents. And you go, well, gee, let me think about that. Who would that 35%? Who would those 35%? Oh, yeah, the 35% who can afford it the least. Yeah, that's about it. It would be those bottom folks, and their tax liability would go up an average about $1,000 a year. Again, the people who can least afford it, shouldering the most burden. But we're going to give Jeff Bezos a tax break. We're going to make sure that the folks who are well-heeled, the folks at the top, they're taken care of. Because, hey. And, oh, by the way, let's not forget, here's the Republican plan. Again, let me tell you, Ron Johnson, repeal. He's not even talking about replacing Obamacare at this point. Just, we're so angry, so divisive, we're got to get rid of that dreaded Obamacare, which means the Affordable Care Act goes, which that healthcare safety net that people used during the pandemic, wiped out. Rick Scott wants higher taxes for poor people and working class people. You, me, absolutely. And they both, if this wasn't enough, so Granny, they're coming for you. Let's not forget this. Both Ron Johnson and Rick Scott, because it's in Rick Scott's 11-point plan of bringing Jesus back, wants to cut Social Security and Medicare. Because we're going back to conservative ideology and conservative principles, which is hooray for me and the you-know-what with you. You're on your own, brother. And the thing is, the hatred that they're spewing, because if you look at the 11-point plan, it's all about make sure you hate the others enough that they hide the fact that they want to cut Social Security and Medicare, hide the fact that they want to take away any bit of a social program, any safety net, and they're going to hide that under the guise of it's all socialism, it's all bad. And what's frustrating and angering is there's a large segment of the population who, well, that kind of hatred and division, they get. That kind of hatred and division, they're A-okay with. They're on board with. They're the people who are watching that F channel. They're the people who are rallying behind, well, Putin's not such a bad guy. I don't really believe they're bombing children's hospitals. I don't really believe that they're bombing the humanitarian corridors. I don't really even believe that they're bombing. You can't make this stuff up, folks. But that's the F channel for you. And that's what crazy gets you. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast, take the program on the go. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back on the other side, going to spend a little time talking with some teachers in Minneapolis about the strike that's going on. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1910. That was the day miners in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, struck for union recognition and the 8-hour workday. They hoped to beat back deep wage cuts and out-of-pocket costs for safety equipment and explosives. As many as 15,000 miners went on strike against 65 mines. Thousands were immediately evicted from company housing. The UMWA helped to set up tent cities. Area coal companies imported immigrant strikebreakers who had little understanding of English or why they were being hired. When they tried to quit and leave company housing, coal company police beat them back to work, refusing to let them leave until they paid the cost of relocation. The situation was so bad that the House Committee on Labor held hearings as to whether workers were being forced into peonage. Injunctions were enforced against strikers picketing on public property near the mines. Many were arrested for simply traveling along public roads. Strikers were also denied access to many municipal services whose facilities were on coal company property. Hundreds of strikers were arrested for trespassing and their leaders held on charges of conspiracy and intimidation. They were routinely harassed, beaten, and fired upon by sheriff's deputies, state troops, and the coal and iron police. Over the course of the strike, more than a dozen strikers and their family members were killed at the hands of security and police forces. The strike wore on through the brutal winter of 1910-1911. Hunger and disease spread throughout the tent cities. After 15 months, the UMWA called off the strike. The union was broke from disbursement of strike funds, and many blacklisted strikers had to leave the state to find work. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Republican politicos are all over Joe Biden for failing to stop inflation. Perhaps you wonder, though, what these squawkers would do if they were in charge. No need to wonder. Just look back to 1974, when Americans were being pummeled by price spikes that topped 12%, nearly double what we're enduring today. But by gollies, President Gerald Ford and his Republican contingent in Congress met the challenge head-on with a new magical program of economic uplift they called WIN, Whip Inflation Now. But it was nothing, just a political slogan with no magic and no action behind it. Price controls, antitrust action? No. GOP Inc. didn't want to offend, much less punish, corporate titans for a little profiteering. So they shifted the blame for inflation to consumers, demanding that families just say no to price gouging. Ford himself went on national TV, urging fellow citizens to join him in buying, quote, only those products and services priced at or below present levels. The core of the Republican program, then, was telling hard-hit wage earners to battle the monopolistic behemoths of big oil, big pharma, big food et al. On their own by simply refusing to pay inflated prices for the gasoline, medicines, groceries, and such that, hello, they had to have. As a reward, everyone who signed a form promising to be an inflation fighter was sent a nifty win button indicating their patriotic participation. Sure enough, Americans responded enthusiastically with an avalanche of ridicule. Even Ford's top economic advisor was whopper-jawed by the GOP's idea that the substance of their policy was a political button. It was surreal. I said to myself, this is unbelievable stupidity.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So yesterday, teachers in Minneapolis went on strike. And, this is another one of those moments where you go, you look at the wages that we pay our teachers in this country, and it's disgraceful. How we treat educators, how we treat the people who treat our most valuable resource, our children. It's disgraceful. And the fact that teachers have to go on strike, have to do the things that teachers have had to do over the last several years just for the basic dignity of a living wage, just for the basic dignity of the resources that they need, and a whole bunch of other stuff. We're going to get into that. That's why I've asked Greta Callahan, who is one of the chapter presidents with the Education Association there, and Shaun, Laden, who is also one of the ESP chapter president. Guys, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks so much for having us.
Of course.
So nobody wants to go on strike. This is a no happiness moment for anyone. Explain to me why this happened.
Well, because we have a district who refuses to change the way things are done, quite frankly. Our students continue to do so much more with so much less, so does our staff. And after decades of underfunding, after watching families flee this district, educators flee this district, hundreds of unfilled vacancies for education support professionals. We are intervening and doing something about it.
So Shaun, what are the demands then? What is it we're looking for?
Yeah, we've been very clear. Our top priority is the living wage for our hourly workers in Minneapolis. Our education support professionals do incredible work. We like to say we make school happen. And, when you're paying folks $24,000 a year to do essential work that we need to have done, that's not going to cut it. And that's why we're seeing hundreds of vacancies and high turnover. We're also committed to smaller class sizes, mental health supports for our students, caseload caps for our related service professionals, so that we can get the services and the supports that our students need and the one-to-one attention our teachers need to make sure our students get the most out of their time.
Greta, we keep hearing the narrative, especially from the people who want to destroy public education. Well, you guys only work 10 months a year. It's almost like a part-time job. You guys make enough already. What's the response there?
Well, first of all, I hope that they step into the classroom for a day. That would be good for them. But we are only paid for the time that we work. So we're certainly not paid over the summer. We have to take second jobs in the summer to make ends meet. And right now, this is just a righteous fight. Our public schools are crumbling in Minneapolis because we have people at the top who are leading our district with looking at our students as market share and are certainly not seeing the human beings that we see every single day and the essential needs that they have and that we are trying to meet.
Now, Shaun, Shaun, you brought up the fact that class size is important. And, I've been talking about this for a long time. I've got 3 kids. I can barely keep them on the same page. I don't know how you keep 20, 30, 40 kids all going in the same direction, let alone, I don't know how you keep them in their seats, let alone to educate them and to be able to keep them on track. So I think class size has got to be one of those really huge issues, especially now coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah, well, and what's really important to note here is we just saw our union siblings across the river in St. Paul get class size caps in the contract they just settled. They just got mental health supports in the contract they just settled. They just settled a contract for highest raises for their hourly educational assistants that they've seen. So we know that a large urban district in Minnesota can do this. What we see in Minneapolis, though, are administrators who are so committed to hanging on to their power and refusing to share it, that they're willing to put folks out on strike. They're willing to put kids, nearly 30,000 students out of class, simply to be able to say, we don't want to put that in the contract. We know they can do it, and it's a matter of choice at this time. And that's why we're so concerned that district administrators and school board members seem to be dug in on this issue. And as you say, class size is so critical to what we're doing. And, what kind of priorities do we have when this is something you're willing to, put folks out on strike on? This is unacceptable, and our members aren't having any of it anymore.
Now, I brought up the pandemic here, and one of the things that I keep hearing, one of the reoccurring themes is, as people are coming back together, as we're, bringing classes back together, mental health issues seem to be something that needs to be addressed, and the resources are something that aren't there. One of the things that I see that you are trying to get put into place are more additional resources for mental health. I know some school districts, and I'm not sure if this is your issue either, but additional guidance counselors, school nurses, even some school districts don't even have librarians. But just those kind of basic resources that I think most of us take for granted. That's stuff that you guys are fighting to protect and make sure that you have, as I understand.
Yeah, and even more than protect, we have lost having a nurse in every school. We have watched our librarians get defunded. We have some of the worst ratios in the country when it comes to students to counselors, students to social workers, students to school psychologists. So we're looking at those nationally recommended ratios. We want to get them in the contract because our students deserve better. And quite frankly, our educators do as well. We need manageable caseloads. Our mental health is also important. And we have lost multiple members from both of our chapters to suicide in the last year and a half. So we are looking out for the whole community, the whole child, and our entire school system.
It's just remarkable that you're in this position. So let me ask you, for the parents out there who, look, this is a burden on them, this is a struggle for them, but they've got to want their kids to have the best possible education that they can get, and this moment is their one shot. So me as a parent, I want my kids to get the best opportunities, and I'm going to defer to my kids' teachers to know what's best for them in the classroom. So if my teachers are going to say, hey, I need this, this, and this, damn it, I want to fight for this, this, and this. So how do parents help you get the things that you guys are fighting for?
Yeah, we've seen that out on the line. Folks are stopping by, dropping off food. They're donating to the strike fund. I mean, there's just a ton of solidarity out there. And we've really seen the community pick up our fight and say, that's right. We know what our educators have been through over the last couple of years. We know the trajectory our schools are on, and we're with you. We want change in our Minneapolis public schools as well. I mean, one of the things we've been really saying, this contract fight is not only about material conditions, but it's an old-fashioned labor fight. Who's got control of the shop floor, right? How do we run our schools? And when we've got HR consultants and data scientists making decisions about what we're going to do and who we're going to be as a district, folks see through that. And we've lost so many students in Minneapolis. We've lost, as Greta was saying, so many educators. And I think of Saida Omar, who's a family liaison, a member of ours who really put it best. We need folks who can connect with our communities. We need folks who make our schools a welcome place for every child, every family. And when the district is, paying our folks poverty wages, choosing to do so, it drives those folks out of education, and we're seeing the results of that.
A quick challenge for our listeners on AM 950 KTNF out in Minneapolis: get out there in the on the strike lines and let our teachers know that you support them. Call that school district. Let them know you are 100% behind them. Let them know I said so. And as this goes on, guys, I want you to come back. Let me know what's going on. Please, by all means, we're here to help you. I'm behind you 100%.
Thank you so much. That means the world to us.
Good stuff, Greta. Shaun, last question. Give me a website. Give me some way where I can send people to help help you guys out.
mft59.org.
We'll go under strike resources, and you can find the strike fund, sign up to pledge, and donate.
And see us on the picket line, please.
Good stuff, guys. Thanks so much. Come back soon. Greta, Shaun, thanks so much. And seriously, if you're listening on KTNF there in Minneapolis, by all means, swing by their picket line and tell them you support them. I'm going to take a quick break right here. Right back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1911. That was the day that coal miners in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, walked out of the mines. It became known as the Slovak Strike because 70% of the strikers were Slovakian immigrants. Unrest was mounting among workers in the non-unionized coal fields. Tens of thousands of miners were signing up to be members of the United Mine Workers of America. And the union was winning improved working conditions and wages for their members, including the 8-hour day. But the Westmoreland miners were not unionized. They still had to work 10-hour days. Then the Keystone Coal Company required the miners to use new safety lights and explosives. The miners had to pay for these items out of their own pockets. Outraged, the miners met to formulate a response. 400 men joined up to a new UMWA local. The company cracked down immediately. They fired 100 men who had attended the meeting. Some were long-term employees who had worked for more than 2 decades in the mines. The miners walked off the job to protest plus the firings. Soon, the strike spread beyond the Keystone Coal Company. Miners joined the strike from 65 mines belonging to 30 companies. The mining companies responded with every tactic in their arsenals. They evicted the miners from their company homes. They won injunctions against picketing. They recruited recent immigrants from Eastern Europe as scabs. They paid off police who responded brutally to the strikers. 16 miners were killed. Although the strikers held out for 16 months, the strike ended in defeat, with many of the strikers being blacklisted from future work in the coal fields. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You got a thought, question, comment, something on your mind, give us a yell. This is one of those moments that you just go, oh, geez. Yeah, how much crazier can the Republican Party get? And how much angrier can they get? Evidently, there's a bill in South Dakota going to be heading to that crazy woman's desk, Kristi Noem. Probably going to sign it because she helped write the damn thing. Evidently, at the university level, they are going to restrict what they call divisive concepts. Divisive concepts. Evidently, we can't talk about race, sex, or gender. Can't talk about any of that stuff. And I got to be honest with you. Isn't this where you're supposed to be talking about that kind of stuff? Isn't the university setting, college, higher education, isn't this where you're supposed to debate all this stuff? Isn't academia where this stuff's supposed to kind of be working this out, where we verbally, mentally, intellectually duke this stuff out? No. And why not? Because, well, mental midgets. Jeez, oh man. This stuff is scary to me. This is kind of the level of, we're no longer going to burn books, we're just going to burn people. Now, it passed South Dakota overwhelmingly because we don't want to make people feel guilty for their racism or their homophobia or their hatred. We don't want them to feel guilty or uncomfortable. This is why this is the weird moment, and we're heading into a weird kind of time in our country. We really are. We're heading into a weird time where I'm looking at this story from Texas, and I've always believed that you can sit down, you can have a beer with anybody, you can sit down, you can break bread with anybody, and you can have a conversation, and there are things that you can agree on. I've always believed that I don't care how crazy you are. We can figure stuff out. I want to believe that. And I still want to believe it. And I'm getting to the point where I not so much anymore. I'm looking at this story from Texas. The couple Amber and Adam Briggle. Evidently, Adam and Amber had a certain person over their house, a guy named Ken Paxton. You may know Ken Paxton. He's somebody there in Texas. The Attorney General there in Texas. He's somebody there. Evidently, 6 years ago, they had him over for dinner. Wonderful. Had a wonderful time. Had a wonderful time having him over for dinner. Just recently, they had visitors. They had visitors over, not for dinner, obviously, but they had visitors over. And the visitors, wanted to know if they were abusing their children. Because evidently one of Amber and Adam's children is transgender. And in Texas, evidently going through the process of having a transgender child is now because of that state and because of Ken Paxton, who was over for dinner and evidently figured this they're now being investigated by the state for abusing their children. Now, look, I don't know 100% where to go with this, but what I do know is that having this kind of hateful, divisive, intrusive kind of law is not the right way to go. And for all the people who are saying, get government out of my life, only to have them put government right in someone's life, I find outrageous. I find completely, totally outrageous. But not unusual, because this is what conservatives do. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Alice on line 1. Alice, how are you today?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
I was just, well, with all the crazy bills going on, between Florida, if it's not Florida, it's Texas. But now, did you see where Missouri, I guess the woman is basing it on the Fugitive Slave Act,
yep.
Where instead of slavery, that if you go out of state to have an abortion and anybody helps you, even though they live in another state, you can sue them too.
Yep. State Representative Mary
totally
Elizabeth
insane.
Coleman. It's like you were reading my notes.
Oh my gosh. I have never seen people who knew nothing about history except what revisionist versions that they've seen, and then they take the worst parts of it and then try to apply it. It's just insane.
No, it's amazing how mean and cruel these people are. And this one, I had said months ago that get ready for this. Once they finally do get to the point where Roe is dead, and it goes back to the states, eventually they're going to drill down to where if you're in a state where it's illegal, they're going to criminalize you crossing borders. And what they've done is, now that Texas has this bounty hunter rule, they're going to allow that. It's going to happen the same thing. And that's what this Missouri law does. It creates the same kind of bounty system where private citizens can sue anyone who helps that person to cross state lines, which again creates just a nightmare scenario, which is what they want. They want massive pain and misery.
Oh, absolutely. It's like they're all about my body, my choice, as long as it's the evangelical nut jobs. They have the right to do anything they want, basically, and everyone else doesn't. That's pretty much, I don't know why they just don't say, look, we're going to turn this into a theocracy, and we're going to have Trump as our king, and instead of the Supreme Court, we're going to have religious courts. I mean, I don't know why they don't just say that.
Yeah, we're going to have clerics. Well, I mean, you look at that representative from Texas.
You have a good one.
Did you ever see? Thanks so much. I appreciate it, Alice. To highlight her point, I mean, which is hysterical to me. You've got that representative from Texas who was, who's with the ISIS bride, who, again, was all infatuated with this crazy, with this woman who was, hooked up with the ISIS people. I mean, he was crazy over her. In fact, I think one of her quote was something along the lines of, he was texting me so much I didn't even think he had a job, because he wanted to hear all the stories. He was infatuated with because it's the forbidden, it's the evil. It's it's the bad, because they've created this. We're in such a weird place, and it's the repression. It always comes back to the repression, and it's these people. I have a friend who tells me, if men had babies, if it were on the other foot, we'd have drive-through abortion clinics. You wouldn't even have to get out of we wouldn't even have to get out of the car. In fact, it would be your patriotic duty. In fact, it would be the brave thing to do to not bring in surplus children, because it would be the brave thing to do, because you're sparing the resources. And look, I don't know, but I can't say he's wrong. I cannot say he's wrong. Now, ultimately, I believe, and I've believed this for a very long time, this is about punishing women. It is what it is, because we never seem to punish the men on the other side. I've said for years, fine, if you want to outlaw abortion, fine. Then if you're going to saddle that woman with that child for 18 years, then like any sentence, the man has to be saddled to that child for 18 years and has to pay for it. And there's got to be a way of ensuring that happens. Because look, I don't even know who my real father's name is. Don't even know my father's name, and I don't want to. In fact, my grandmother took it to her grave, and it literally killed her, because I didn't want to know, and never did anything for me, and we suffered because of it. That's wrong. We should have a system that says, look, you created a child. You made that choice. You made that decision. You're responsible for it. And if we did that, if we truly if we truly had laws that did that, I think you'd see a huge, huge change. I think if we had laws that had a safety net that said, you know what? Okay, fine. Some deadbeats has a child out of wedlock. That kid gets to go to college for free. Really? That kid gets health care. That kid gets to go to a good school in a good zip code. Because what we know is children who are born out of wedlock overwhelmingly are born into poverty and don't get the opportunities of having to go to the good school districts. Which is why I'm such an advocate for funding in urban and rural areas that are so desperate in need of resources. Because we've so badly screwed up the policies. And you've got these whack jobs like this Representative Mary Elizabeth Coleman, who, I'm introducing bills. We're going to make sure those women that, they're going to be punished. And she's not alone. There are a bunch of states that are doing this stuff because it's all funded from the top. All the stuff that the right wing does, because these people aren't that bright. These representatives aren't smart. They're not workers. These are people who they take their marching orders. They're just smart enough to go, here, someone did my homework for me. And they turn this legislation in, the model legislation they get from whatever think tank hands it out. And our Supreme Court, our corporate-controlled, theocratic Supreme Court, what are they doing? They're allowing this stuff to happen. And it's going to get bad. And this is where Democrats better grow a spine and better do it quickly. And better do something to stand up and fight these culture wars. Look, I've never been one to take on the issue of abortion or gay rights. It's never been my issue. But the right is literally pummeling the working class with it. And while they're dividing us over it, and they're using it to continue to divide and conquer, simultaneously robbing us blind. In fact, you look at what's going on in Ukraine. One of the justifications being thrown out for Putin going into Ukraine is because they have gay parades. How sadistic is that? Seriously, how sadistic is that? But it is the world in which we live. And Democrats better spine up and fight this stuff back because it's coming. At some point, I have friends who are like, we're going to start an underground railroad for women who need health care. Is that what it's going to come? Is that what it's going to be in the 21st century? Horrible. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Never miss an episode. Also, special edition podcasts we put out. Subscribe so you never miss anything that we put out. Man, it's getting worse out there.
We have to ensure that they don't generate unmanageable risks to energy supplies in European countries and beyond.
EU moves to cut dependence on Russian gas imports.
The plant spokesman warned of a real threat of nuclear danger from the attack.
Russian takeover of Ukraine nuclear plant underscores nuclear vulnerability in wartime. Plus,
Cheers erupted at the United Nations Environment Assembly in Nairobi as 175 nations agreed to clean up the mess.
United Nations to create legally binding treaty to end global plastic pollution.
I'll believe it when I see it. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Actually, I see no inconsistency, by the way, in moving away from dependency on Russian hydrocarbons to moving away from dependency on hydrocarbons altogether.
Well, neither do I, Boris Johnson. Nice to hear from a non-insane conservative. Sad how they went extinct in the U.S. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, as I understood it, everything was now okay, at least the danger passed at that nuclear power plant that was under fire in Ukraine. You got an update?
Yes, we do. In the wake of the Russian military's harrowing attack on Ukraine's largest nuclear power plant late last week, the International Atomic Energy Agency says it is still negotiating with Russia to allow in experts to help manage the safety of all of Ukraine's nuclear power facilities. Although no radiation releases were detected in that initial attack, the Director General of the IAEA on Monday said that Russia's military assault on the power plant destroyed a small neutron generator in a building on the grounds in violation of international protection rules. Again, no radiation was released, but it was a serious, serious fire. The incident has triggered global alarm about the vulnerabilities of nuclear plants to wartime attacks. Meanwhile, benchmark oil prices are surging as traders react to the growing prospect of Western sanctions on Russian oil and gas exports that indirectly fund Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
React or capitalize on?
A bipartisan group of lawmakers in Congress say they've agreed on legislation that would bar Russian oil imports to the U.S., even though it would further spike gasoline prices. But European Union governments, dependent on Russia for about a third of their energy needs,
Probably not a good idea.
on Tuesday announced a plan to cut their reliance on Russian gas 2/3 by the end of this year. In a Monday press conference, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson cautioned that a full phase-out will take time, but it is the goal.
You can't simply close down use of oil and gas overnight. Clearly, there is going to be a transitional period. We're going to have to look for supply. We're going to have to look for substitute supplies from elsewhere, and we're going to have to do it together.
The UN International Energy Agency released a 10-point plan this week to cut Europe's dependence on Russian gas imports by about a third over the coming year. And they would do that by speeding up the replacement of gas-fired boilers with next-generation electric heat pumps, as Norway has done. The IEA projects that if the U.S. and other countries did the same, the more heat pumps that are installed year after year would increase the global supply of gas and displace Russian exports.
Moving from boilers to heat pumps can cut gas usage by a third?
Because they're all electric.
We should all do that.
Indeed. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki on Monday debunked attempts by Republicans, the American Petroleum Institute, and right-wing media to exploit the war in Ukraine for political purposes in demanding the release of more public lands for drilling and weaker regulations. Psaki said that federal policies are not preventing the oil and gas industry from increasing production right now on their existing stockpile of approved permits, but that transitioning away from fossil fuels is the smart strategy.
Right now, there are 9,000 unused approved permits to drill onshore. So I think you're misidentifying what the actual issue is. But if we're looking to the future and what we can do to prevent this from being a challenge in future crises, the best thing we can do is reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and foreign oil so that we're not worried about the whims of a foreign dictator.
Finally, some good news. The United Nations Environment Assembly late last week adopted an historic resolution aimed at ending the scourge of plastic pollution. They agreed to a framework to develop the world's first ever legally binding treaty to address the global plastic pollution problem due by the end of 2024. The new treaty would restrict the explosive growth of plastic pollution and its impacts over the entire plastics life cycle, from design to production to disposal. But there is a divide between major plastics producers like the fossil fuel industry, who want governments to focus on waste management and recycling,
Of course.
while the European Union and developing nations are aiming to reduce plastic production itself.
Good. Let's go with that one. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I know with everything going on in Ukraine and, all of the, the gas prices and, all of the other news, the little convoy thing kind of got lost. Now, granted, it wasn't the gazillion trucks that we were promised. It didn't shut everything down. It wasn't the big, national news story that we saw in the Great White North. But there were still a couple people, a handful of kooks. In fact, we had one here in Pennsylvania who held the one-man convoy, did the one-man trip from Scranton down to D.C., couldn't find it. But, hey, tried anyway, and good on you, Bob. Maybe next time. But they're still trying and still out there circling the Capitol, and here to share some thoughts on, the big convoy, what it's going on, why it's going on, and what the plans are for the future. I've asked Zachary Petrizzo to come talk with us. He's a media reporter at the Daily Beast. He's been following this from the beginning. He's been one of my sources for keeping up on this. Zachary, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having so much for having me, Rick.
So walk me through this. At the beginning, it was about the mask mandates. It was about the vaccine mandates. But all that stuff's gone. They've won. Have they declared victory on that? And have the demands gone on? Are there more demands? And what are they?
Sure, absolutely. This is a big question, especially among kind of the people that live in the Beltway area, right? It's what are their demands, which I don't think have been very specific in nature. And also, when are they going home? And so, to kind of answer the first question here, what are their demands? Their demands are kind of vague in nature at best. They want to appeal. They want to repeal mandates, which, of course, many of which have since kind of been rolled back over the past couple of weeks. So there isn't much ground to be made there. And then, of course, they want to meet with. I was out in Hagerstown, which is where they're posted up, about an hour and 30 minutes northwest of DC. So they're posted up out there. And went out there and talked with them. And the other demand they have is they want to meet with pretty much every single lawmaker on Capitol Hill. So that demand kind of hasn't totally been satisfied either. So that's kind of the lay of the land in terms of what they're looking for. But like I said, a lot of those vaccine mandates, and of course there was never a federal vaccination mandate, but those vaccine mandates have really already been rolled back.
Yeah, now they want to meet with all the legislators, and that's great. Look, I'm all in favor of citizen lobbyists going and meeting with legislators. That's a great thing. Good for them. I think that's our right, and it's something we should be doing. And I understand, like Ted Cruz came out to do some pandering, so good there. But I go, okay, well, what's the move to do that? What's the move to get the attention? They've been circling D.C. I thought there was a plan to go into the city, block everything up. How come that hasn't happened?
Yeah. Good question. I think there's a sense among the truckers, at least when I was out there chatting with a lot of them, to a big extent, they're very divided, right? We reported this at the Daily Beast that, some of the truckers, quite frankly, are pretty divided on if they should enter DC, if they shouldn't enter DC, what steps they should take. And there's a big fear out there, especially when it comes to, the events of January 6th and potentially them being rolled up and getting in trouble again, getting their truck permits pulled, stuff like that. Over potentially going into DC. But yeah, like you said, they're circling DC. They've been circling DC since Sunday. They started doing 2 laps on Sunday, taking up 1 lane. Then yesterday they did 1 lap, taking up 2 lanes. Today they got rained out. There was the lightest of mists in DC.
How do you get rained out? How do trucks get rained out?
It's a good question. It's a good question, but they took a day of rest because of some drizzles this morning. I went outside too, and it wasn't definitely wasn't pouring. It was a very light rain. I think on the phone app it said it was a drizzle. So
now here's the thing, and I keep asking the question. I've seen these guys, they're doing this. Gas prices are through the roof. Diesel prices are through the roof. Is this the best use of resources to get attention? Because look, I mean, you're blocking up traffic. If I'm going to have a protest, I think a protest to get attention is one thing, and a protest to really tick people off by being in front of them, because trucks, especially large numbers of them, tend to upset people, especially when they're in front of you. Do they understand that this is probably not the smartest move to gain attention?
I think a lot of them perhaps aren't thinking that far in advance, I guess, would be a good way to approach this. I think they see it as, look, we're gonna burn through these resources, and a lot of them have this understanding, or at least think that they have a pledge from kind of the organizers that they're going to be reimbursed for a lot of this, right? There were funds raised for the People's Convoy, somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 million. So look, the truckers think that they can divide it up and potentially, break even on this whole endeavor.
Oh, I can't wait for the lawsuits of that.
Right. And wait until other people, historically, especially with some of these right of center, right wing fundraisers, a lot of hands get put into the pot and money's out, and then it's mysteriously gone. So I think that there's, a lot of questions that remain there in terms of what exactly is motivating this and how they're being paid for their activities.
Wow. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show with Zachary Petrizzo. He's a media reporter over at the Daily Beast. If you want to check out the work that he's doing, check out thedailybeast.com. We'll get links out on social media. I could check out the amazing reporting he's been doing. And he's been all over this. There have been tons of reports. In fact, he's how I was able to catch up with Bob Bullis coming down from Scranton. Direct messaged him on Twitter and go, hey, where are you? And he led me right to the spot. And I was within minutes of intercepting the one-man convoy, which in our neighborhood, finding one truck in our area is a Herculean leap. So I want to thank you for that. But here's the thing, and I look at Bob Bullis, and I point him out in particular because I know Bob Bullis is the owner of Bullis Trucking. I know he has the resources to take a bunch of days off from work because he doesn't work. All of his drivers work. He could hire, he has drivers that work. He could have had probably a whole bunch of truckers behind him, only they work for him. I got to wonder, all these people who have all this resource and all these trucks to be driving around for 5 days or 10 days or however long it's been to get from California, I got to go, what are these people doing? Because every truck driver that I know, especially the ones that are owner operators, those trucks better be moving and rolling with freight in the trailers or they're going belly up. Now, look, I'm in favor of a trucker protest if you're talking about wages, hours, conditions, if you're talking about cheap freight rates, if you're talking about abusive dispatchers, if you're talking about the horrible conditions and treatment by our DOT, having to go through terror risk assessments every 4 years and fingerprinting and all the crap that a CDL driver has to go through. I'm with you, brothers, but this seems nonsensical to me. So I got to wonder who these people are and what they are doing and what they do for a living, that they've got all this free time.
Yeah, I mean, just to pick up what you're saying there. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the truckers, like Bob Bullis, are owners. So when I was out there chatting with a lot of them, there was one gentleman I spoke with from Buffalo, New York, who had mentioned that he owns a fleet of 10 trucks, which is no small number of trucks to own. So I think a lot of them are owners out there. A lot of them brought 5 trucks, etc., to the event. So clearly they have the resources and the funds to kind of go at this thing for a week. I know the one guy I spoke with said that he lost $50,000 in invoices 1 week alone. remains to be seen how exactly true that is. But the larger point being that these guys, clearly have some sort of funds kind of in the bank to have this go on. I don't think it goes on longer than a week and a half, 2 weeks. I really don't. I think this starts to fizzle, even with organizers suggesting that they're going to have rotating truckers and things like that. But yeah, back to your point. I mean, Bob Bullis is a Scranton guy, and he's quite a character. I was on the phone with him, and you had pointed out that he had a dangerous placard?
He had a placard. He had a single dangerous placard on the back of his trailer. And I know that they did that on purpose to go, ooh, we're dangerous. That is a DOT violation. That is a ticketable offense. And it's a sizable one. To be hauling an empty trailer that is placarded hazardous, that's a huge, if you get pulled over, it's a huge shot on your CSA scores, and it's a fine. So if he really is a CDL holding driver, that could be detrimental.
Wow. I did not know that. I'm gonna have to look into that further. I mean, he's a real character. I saw him up on Capitol Hill yesterday handing out business cards. He gives me he definitely wants to be something in the movement. He wants to be like a leader or an orchestrator. But when he came to DC, as you know, when he came, it was like a one-man band, and he got, because the Beltway Circular in Washington, DC, and he just kept going in circles, and he was very confused. So that's what happened to him when he came.
No, he wants to be somebody, clearly wants to be somebody. But again, he's another one of those guys born on third base, thought he hit a triple. Grandpa started the company, dad, built it into something, and it was handed to him. And now he thinks he's somebody, and good for lucky him. He was the sperm donor, sperm lottery winner. Good for him. He didn't run it completely into the ground. Good for him. But I'm sorry, you don't automatically get to the front of the line. And I think he's learning that. Literally nobody followed him except for, what was her name? Betty. And then that crazy guy, the other crazy guy with all the flags.
Yeah. No, of course. Yeah. And Betsy wasn't even in like a car. It sounded like Betsy was sitting right next to him in the truck.
Yeah. And Betsy, and here's the other thing. And this is where, Betsy was driving a car down the road that should have been pulled over because she had her giant F Biden flag that was covering the license plate. So where are the Pennsylvania State Police not pulling these bozos over? I guarantee if they were black people, they'd probably been on the side of the highway handcuffed by then. But again, I digress. I know this is the wrong venue for that. But this is the kind of thing that you see happening. They have this kind of, that they're so important they can get away with this. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show with Zach Petrizzo. Zach is a media reporter of a Daily Beast. Make sure you check out his work. If you got a question, thought, comment, chime in real quick. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast so you have the program. Never miss a minute. So where's this going to go now? Where do you see this going from here? Is this going to wrap up at some point? And what do you think the legacy of this is going to be? Is this just going to be something we look back and going, yeah, this was just a couple of characters trying to make something? Or do you think someone will look at this and go, oh, this was, the legacy of what happened in Canada? How do you see this?
Yeah, I think Ottawa, they were clearly protesting these mandates, right? And these nationwide mandates. And I think in many ways, the People's Convoy is very rudderless, right? They have a leader who isn't a super seasoned veteran in terms of organizing or anything like that. And I think there's also a lot of, perhaps there's a lot of dissent among the ranks. There's a lot of frustration among the ranks. There's a lot of anger among the ranks in terms of why they're not going into DC. Critics are calling it just a big beer party out in Hagerstown, right? So, I don't think the legacy is that of Ottawa. I think it's much, a different tale, one that includes, not much, not many characters or super Trump world stars born out of the movement, just because it hasn't been a huge success. And if anything, unfortunately, I think they've become kind of, the butt of some jokes, because they're derailed by a light mist, and their cars are breaking down on the highway while they're trying to quote unquote be a huge pain for DC, the DC motoring public.
Yeah, because that's how you win people over. It's how you make friends, by making their commute much more difficult. I guess last line of questioning I've got for you then. And looking at this, what's going to be the most memorable moment in this for you? Was it the idiot from Scranton coming down in the one-man convoy, or is there something else? Because I got to imagine when they had their little shindig in Hagerstown, because I know they had the stands full of people, and there was some kind of like a NASCAR kind of event thing or a baby NASCAR kind of thing. I think that had to be entertaining. What kind of fun did you have there?
Yeah, Hagerstown was interesting. A lot of interesting characters out there. I would say probably one of the most interesting moments was the Bob Bullis stuff. I mean, he was dead set on quote unquote choking DC, and it was just hilarious, kind of the way it unfolded and the way he was on the phone with me, kind of like narrating how he's getting lost in DC and how he's asking me for directions. I don't think this is how this goes, right? Like, I don't think he's like, should we go? I was up. He told me that he told me he was in near College Park, which is near the University of Maryland.
Okay.
Which is
495.
Yeah. That's where he told me it was about. And Betsy, I got on the phone with Betsy and was like kind of confirming this, trying to. And I was like, well, drop me a pin on the iPhone, right? Send me a location. Oh, they're in Alexandria, Virginia. They're in Alexandria. How is Alexandria, College Park, Alexandria? That's a long way. So these people, I mean, they were in it deep, and they were clearly pretty lost.
Oh my gosh, that is too funny. Oh, that is, and then at $5 a gallon, that is great.
Yeah. What? Yeah. And at the same time, what they're hauling like their tractor, so it's like what 6 miles to the gallon or something like that. I mean, these get horrible gas mileage, and they're out there running around. So it's definitely an interesting assignment.
Oh yeah, these are our captains of industry. Yeah. But Zach, I appreciate the time, man, and thank you for the laugh. Well, it's something I absolutely needed. If you missed any of today's this you got to go back and listen to this. Get the podcast and make sure you check out Zach's reporting over at the Daily Beast. We'll get links out on how you can do that. Fabulous stuff, Zach. I appreciate the time, man.
Thanks so much.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Your thoughts, questions, comments, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I got to tell you, that was the funniest thing I've heard in a long time. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Yeah, we're going to go to the nation's capital. We're going to get there by truck. But we're not going to have a plan. Now, understand, if as a CDL driver, and this is what's important, as a truck driver, one of the things on the test, is that before you leave for a trip, you have a plan, that you have the route mapped out, that you actually know where the hell you're going. You don't just go, I'm going to go for a ride. It's Sunday. Me's going to go driving. Now, again, he didn't have the DOT numbers on the door. That is a violation. They could probably write him a ticket for that. And I guess he was lucky enough he didn't get pulled into any of the chicken coops. He also, had the placarding violation. I gotta imagine at one point or another he was in a wrong lane at some point on 495. It's amazing that if he does have a CDL, truly any idiot can get one. It's really that simple. Because there he was doing 55 miles an hour, doing 50. He was doing a cool 50 when I went by him. In a 65 on a stretch of road where 85 you're getting past, making people really happy. He was making a lot of friends that day. A lot of friends. Good news. 3 more stores in Buffalo, New York have gone union there for Starbucks. Good on them. That means 6 of the stores there in the Buffalo area have unionized. The number nationwide over 100 and growing. We're seeing that's happening. The Amazon election rumor I'm hearing going very well. People not happy about the treatment last time around, encouraged by the fact that there's a second election, may actually get a win there. Very happy. And I think workers are finally had enough. And I look at this latest story that I came across yesterday. Remember Better.com? Do you remember hearing, it was a little while ago, wasn't a couple of months ago. The CEO of Vishal Garg, evidently he fired 900 employees on a Zoom call. Evidently now they're going to fire another 3,000 of them. Because evidently, business ain't doing so great. And I would assume it has everything to do with the fact that, guess what? You treat your employees like garbage. What point is it that they're going to do any work for you? Now this time, he didn't fire them over Zoom, just locked them out. Just, they went to work one day, everything done. But this time, I guess Better.com said the employees who are going to be let go are going to get 60 to 80 days of severance. They'll also get 3 months of COBRA coverage that will be paid by the company. And they're going to get something called career transition support. Yes. Now, I got to wonder, is it 60 to 80 days? Does that sound about right? Now, evidently, the company has just over 9,000 employees. This time, they didn't fire them via Zoom. I guess they just shut them out. Said, "Oh, sorry. Well, here's what you're going to get." The treatment of workers in this country is something that's just horrible. And like we talked about yesterday, there's this imagination that, well, you've got choice. You can go there. It's a competitive market. It's not. These employers have such control and such power that it's one of the main reasons that I'm a supporter of labor unions. It's one of the reasons that I believe that unions should bring back and fight for hiring halls. That labor should hold on to its labor. If you want to hire people, if you want workers, you have to go to unions to get workers who you pay the unions for the labor, and they administer benefits and wages and that stuff. I'd love to see that, because this way you're not disposable anymore. But that's a whole nother argument for another day. If you missed any of the program thus far, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. Also, we do additional podcasts every week, so make sure you check those out as well. Subscribe, never miss an episode. You can do that at iTunes, the iHeart, Stitcher, Podbean, everywhere in between. I'm I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1911. That was the day that coal miners in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, walked out of the mines. It became known as the Slovak Strike because 70% of the strikers were Slovakian immigrants. Unrest was mounting among workers in the non-unionized coal fields. Tens of thousands of miners were signing up to be members of the United Mine Workers of America. And the union was winning improved working conditions and wages for their members, including the 8-hour day. But the Westmoreland miners were not unionized. They still had to work 10-hour days. Then the Keystone Coal Company required the miners to use new safety lights and explosives. The miners had to pay for these items out of their own pockets. Outraged, the miners met to formulate a response. 400 men joined up to a new UMWA local. The company cracked down immediately. They fired 100 men who had attended the meeting. Some were long-term employees who had worked for more than 2 decades in the mines. The miners walked off the job to protest the firings. Soon, the strike spread beyond the Keystone Coal Company. Miners joined the strike from 65 mines belonging to 30 companies. The mining companies responded with every tactic in their arsenals. They evicted the miners from their company homes. They won injunctions against picketing. They recruited recent immigrants from Eastern Europe as scabs. They paid off police who responded brutally to the strikers. 16 miners were killed. Although the strikers held out for 16 months, the strike ended in defeat, with many of the strikers being blacklisted from future work in the coal fields. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Republican politicos are all over Joe Biden for failing to stop inflation. Perhaps you wonder, though, what these squawkers would do if they were in charge. No need to wonder. Just look back to 1974, when Americans were being pummeled by price spikes that topped 12%, nearly double what we're enduring today. But by gollies, President Gerald Ford and his Republican contingent in Congress met the challenge head-on with a new magical program of economic uplift they called WIN, Whip Inflation Now. But it was nothing, just a political slogan with no magic and no action behind it. Price controls, antitrust action? No. GOP Inc. didn't want to offend, much less punish, corporate titans for a little profiteering. So they shifted the blame for inflation to consumers, demanding that families just say no to price gouging. Ford himself went on national TV, urging fellow citizens to join him in buying, quote, only those products and services priced at or below present levels. The core of the Republican program, then, was telling hard-hit wage earners to battle the monopolistic behemoths of big oil, big pharma, big food et al. On their own by simply refusing to pay inflated prices for the gasoline, medicines, groceries, and such that, hello, they had to have. As a reward, everyone who signed a form promising to be an inflation fighter was sent a nifty win button indicating their patriotic participation. Sure enough, Americans responded enthusiastically with an avalanche of ridicule. Even Ford's top economic advisor was whopper-jawed by the GOP's idea that the substance of their policy was a political button. It was surreal. I said to myself, this is unbelievable stupidity.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, we had talked about the big task force on worker empowerment and organizing, and we talked about how the president, who, look, in my view, has done a great job being the most pro-union president in my lifetime. So much more that needs to be done, but looking in the right direction. And this past weekend, had labor leaders meet with the president, talk about the agenda, talk about how we're going to help make things better for working people across the country. And here to share some thoughts on what that meeting was about, what it was like, and, well, what some of the marching orders coming out are going to be. That's why I've asked Greg Regan to come talk with us. Greg is the president of the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. He was in attendance. Got a nice picture with the president. Always nice. Greg, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So, saw the smiling picture. That's always nice to get, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what was the big shindig? What was the meeting? What was discussed?
Yeah, honestly, this was more about a labor unity around the president and what he's accomplished so far. I think when he has meetings like this, it proves to be true what he said a long time, is that the White House is labor's house now. We talked about his accomplishments. We talked about whether it be keeping people employed with the American Recovery Plan, or putting more people to work with the Investment Act, and doing it with union jobs through the Workforce Empowerment Plan and other tools the federal government has. We need to get out there and sing that story and make sure that people know what he's accomplished, because there's a lot going on right now. The news is taken up with a lot of stuff, not a lot of great news internationally. But we have a really good story to tell in terms of what it means to what this White House and this administration has done for working people.
Yeah, right now everything is all about Ukraine, all about how horrible Vladimir Putin is, and rightfully so, and all the misery that's coming with the high gas prices. But also, I think you got to remember, I think this president has done a great job. He's done an incredible job to this point with what's going on over there. And he's also being saddled with a lot of stuff that's out of his control. And I know all of my friends are going, oh, Biden flipped the switch. He's raising gas prices, which is nonsense. But I'm sure you hear it too.
Yeah, no, and it is, everyone's going to find, presidents often face this, things that are out of their control that they did not create, but they have to deal with. And right now he's dealing with a lot of that, whether it be inflation, whether it be, he certainly did not institute the pandemic in the first place, which is the biggest cause of inflation right now. And he certainly didn't start the war in Europe. But what he has done, despite taking office at an extremely difficult time, with the pandemic still raging, new surges coming along, making sure that we have sensible policies on healthcare and putting people to work and making it union focused. The fact that he's not afraid to say union is such an important part of it. It gives us a lot of hope. And especially, when we follow through, when you start seeing the money really flow on infrastructure, and we start seeing every community in this country sees the improvements that's going to bring in terms of expanded service, fewer potholes, better airports, you name it. All of that stuff, the best stuff is yet to come. It truly is.
No, and the hope is that this spring it starts rolling out in a big way, so people actually start to see it, and that you don't have governors like Kim Reynolds there in Iowa going, oh, look at all the wonderful things that I'm doing for you with the money that Joe Biden and the Democrats have provided, without mentioning that part of it. And that's the part that I love. The people who are against all of the investments that Biden and the Democrats have been able to get through, they're the ones who are more than happy to take credit for it. So out of this meeting, obviously you got to go back to the membership. You got to get out to the American people and explain, look, this president has gotten some stuff done. What does that messaging look like?
Well, I think it really talks about, making sure we understand the direct impacts of some of these programs that are being delivered. Talking about how, yeah, sure, we're getting money for zero and low emission buses. But also in that money is some of the best worker protection language we could have possibly dreamed of, making sure that we're going to be building these with union jobs, making sure that the people who are going to be operating these buses have the proper training, and that they're going to be able to, their careers grow along with the new buses, the new technology that's being rolled out. All that stuff is written into that agreement. And that's going to be a key part to making sure that this is a success, is that all of this stuff is implemented properly. So for us, a big part of it is partnering with the recipients of grant money to make sure that we're holding them accountable, making sure that our members and our communities understand how this is growing jobs and how it's actually making sure that wages are going up, that worker power is growing along with it. This is, for us, it's about making sure the details are known and making sure that we localize it as much as possible. This is going to create, we're going to deliver on this project that's been decades in the making. We're going to fix that bridge that I know everyone's afraid to drive over, things like that.
Yeah. And the part of it that I think is most important, and, the president hit on it in his State of the Union, that he wants to build an economy and grow the economy, bottom up, middle out. instead of this top-down, trickle-down nonsense. This plays into what you're talking about, ensuring that workers get the training and the benefit that comes from this, and making sure that the jobs that are created out of this are good jobs, not just that we're creating jobs, but they're actually good jobs with good incomes and good futures. I think that's the important part, and that's the part that needs to be hammered home at every opportunity.
And you look at the way we've spent money on things like transit in the past. I think it's less than 1% of the money that is spent on transit goes towards workforce training, frontline workforce training. And we have dedicated money in the infrastructure bill and now also continuing in the appropriations process, specifically for a National Transit Workforce Training Center. That means that we're not only, this isn't just an investment in iron and concrete or buses. This is an investment in people. And that's the important part that oftentimes has been missing from when we are investing here, because we need to grow a workforce that's able to sustain and produce in terms of expanded services, better transportation options, and grow for the long term. And I think what we've put into that bill and what the president is doing in terms of implementing it is going to go a long way towards making that happen.
Yeah. And here's the thing, and this is why I think, transit especially is so important, especially now. I mean, we started off with gas prices. What would be okay if we had a public transit system that we could, I don't know, use. I don't know, maybe to get to work, maybe to move people around, maybe to get people off the congested highways so that they moved a little bit better. Maybe, I don't know, give people, commuters and travelers options. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. Maybe if we had an option of getting around, maybe. Thoughts?
Well, yeah, and the other thing I would note there is there has been, I think, what rightfully so, a real focus on equity and trying to right some of the wrongs in our history here. And transit in particular is one of the best ways to try to narrow those gaps, because a lot of the communities that are least served are communities that are the most underprivileged, communities of color, things like that. By investing in more transit and making it usable, you're making it easier for people to get to jobs. And also a substantial portion of the workforce are people of color, and they're union jobs that come with good benefits, that are good pay, the type of thing you can raise a family on. So all of these things I think are big positives, and that's part of our story that we need to tell. And it's up to us, it's up to Democrats, up to the White House, but we're the ones who can talk truthfully to our members about how this is going to make our lives better.
Yeah. You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Greg Regan. Greg is president of the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. AFL-CIO.org, the website. You can also check out Greg's website. TTD.org is theirs as well. Did I get that right this time, Greg?
Yes, you did.
Because I always want to throw TDT, AFL in there, and I always screw it up. It's just TTD.org. We'll get links out on social media, so it's easy to get to. Now, obviously, this is a big part of it. The investment coming out, a big part of it. But this big report that they just came out with, I have a huge task force come together. The Worker Organizing and Empowerment Task Force came out with this large report, this huge study on how we're going to make it easier for workers to organize, how we're going to make it the mission of the federal government, how we're going to return organizing and the push to get people to join and form unions. I think it's a great idea, but I'm still looking around the country, and I'm looking at Amazon, I'm looking at Starbucks, I'm looking at all these places and going, man, it is so damn hard for workers to go, what, I've got the right to organize, and yet I got to go through all of this just to get my right to it? It's got to be easier than this, Greg.
Yes. And look, you're right. I mean, there's a lot stacked against us when it comes to workers' rights to organize. We're seeing that play out when it goes, whether it be Amazon or other areas, Starbucks, for example. I mean, a huge effort, and yet that's a fairly small portion of the overall Starbucks workforce that is now recognized with a union. What I think was really interesting about this report, and there's a lot of it in there that I am no expert on, but they went in depth, even just the section from the Department of Transportation about what they can do to make it easier for workers to organize was really thoughtful, and it wasn't flowery rhetoric. This is about what policies can the federal government utilize to make it easier to join a union? What are the problems, whether it be worker misclassification on the trucking side? What about internally? What can we do within our own agency to make it more effective and give our unions a stronger voice. And all of that stuff, and that was just the Department of Transportation. That was 150 some pages. And every agency in the federal government was doing the same thing. So, I mean, this is a comprehensive look from the bottom up about what are the structural barriers for organizing, and how can the federal government use its own tools to make it easier. And this is going to be an ongoing process. I know this was just the first step here, and there are going to be other areas where we're going to be able to engage with the White House and find out how do we, remove those barriers? How do we continue to make progress? And all of that stuff should be really exciting for us.
No, and this is something that in talking with union members, because I say this all the time, if you're a union member right now, consider yourself fortunate because you're almost a dinosaur. At 6% of the private sector workforce, you're not in the norm. But you should be. When I was a younger man, there we 23% of the workforce. You knew a lot of unionized brothers and sisters out there making good wages, having good benefits, having good retirement security. That number has dwindled down. So for one, self-survival, self-preservation, we should be wanting this. But for two, just basic fairness and decency. And if we want to close this massive inequality gap that's gripping this country right now, a big part of it is giving workers the right to collectively bargain for those better wages, hours, and conditions.
Yeah, I mean, that's economic security is one of the biggest tools we have towards trying to right some of our historical wrongs. And I always like to point out in our sector in transportation, I mean, we have some of the highest union density of any industry in the country, and that's public and private sector. You look at freight railroads, for instance, they're class 1 railroads. They're the most, they're basically wall-to-wall union. Airlines are over 80% union. Those are private companies that, at least, especially before the pandemic, were reaching the highest profit levels they've ever made. And members were helping to reap the rewards of that through the collective bargaining process. We're a success story for how you can make sure that, we can compete internationally, we can compete domestically, and we can do it while paying people a fair wage and giving them benefits. Granted, I still have my complaints with the way some of these companies do business, but we have we're in a much stronger position to be able to fight them and to get what our members deserve in terms of safety and compensation and benefits because we have strong unions in those sectors.
Absolutely.
And that's an example for the rest of the country, frankly.
No, and for everybody, I say this all the time, and I sound like a broken record half the time, but every CEO in this country has got a contract. Every worker should have one as well, to where everything is spelled out in black and white, especially now coming out of this pandemic, because at the end of the day, if, as the old saying goes, if you're not at the table, you're clearly on the menu. But you brought up an interesting point because the transportation sector is one of the most heavily unionized. And I look at the airline sector, especially what my friend Sarah Nelson has done with the flight attendants, and they didn't suffer nearly as much as other sectors of the workforce had because, look, they went to the table, they fought, and they went to Congress and they fought, and they were out there fighting for their members every step of the way, and they did all right.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, the payroll support program for airlines, I mean, the language that we got in there to make sure that this wasn't just going to be corporate welfare to keep them afloat and allow them to, go into bankruptcy and get CBAs. I mean, we made sure that they couldn't use this as an excuse to readjust collective bargaining agreements. We made sure they couldn't use this as an excuse to downsize their workforce. There were furlough protections in there. And we got the same type of language when we were giving aid to transit agencies to make sure they had to maintain services. They had to make sure that they maintained their workforce. Amtrak originally furloughed people, and then we got language there that required them to bring those furloughed employees back and maintain and bring back service levels. So that doesn't happen without people like me and Sarah and all of our allies here in Washington fighting hard and making sure people understand the consequences if they get this policy wrong. And that's the strength of a union voice here.
Yeah, it's that simple. So coming out of this big meeting, I want to go back to your big meeting over the weekend with the president. Which I find incredible. Look, with everything going on overseas, with everything going on with Putin, that the fact that he's going to have time, that this is that important, that building the middle class and rebuilding the working class of this country is that important, that he's going to take time to get this right. I just find fabulous, and I think it's good. What's the marching order going forward? What's the push from here?
Well, for us, it really is about telling that story about how how the policies that have been in place so far are benefiting working people across this country. That is our marching order. We need to go there and tell the story to our members and to the communities that they live in, and to make sure that people understand how these policies are affecting people on a day-to-day lives for the better. We also had asks of the president. We need to make sure that we're continuing to be in the loop when things are going to be rolled out, so we can tell that story effectively. We need to, identify continued roadblocks where there are problems that the White House can be helpful with. And everybody that was in the room had something that they could both thank him for and another thing to put on the agenda for the future, because we know he's going to have our backs when we have a big fight coming up, and we're going to need a little bit of help. But for us, I think it goes both ways, where we need to tell that story. We need to share what our experiences are, and make sure that we, by continuing to hammer home at it, I think that can help hopefully allow us to accomplish more in the future, but also, bulk him up a little bit, get him the recognition he deserves.
Yeah. One, hold him accountable, and two, get out there and sing his praises, so that when you're holding him accountable, you can keep moving in the direction we want him to go. Like the old story with FDR. If you want me to do something, get out in the street and make me do it. I'm right there with you. But Greg, I appreciate the time. Great stuff. I hope you'll come back and share some more with us.
You got it. Sure thing.
Good stuff. Our good friend Greg Regan, president of the Transportation Trades Department there at the AFL-CIO. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, we had talked about the big task force on worker empowerment and organizing, and we talked about how the president, who, look, in my view, has done a great job being the most pro-union president in my lifetime. So much more that needs to be done, but looking in the right direction. And this past weekend, had labor leaders meet with the president, talk about the agenda, talk about how we're going to help make things better for working people across the country. And here to share some thoughts on what that meeting was about, what it was like, and, well, what some of the marching orders coming out are going to be. That's why I've asked Greg Regan to come talk with us. Greg is the president of the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. He was in attendance, got a nice picture with the president, always nice. Greg, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So, saw the smiling picture. That's always nice to get, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what was the big shindig? What was the meeting? What was discussed?
Yeah, honestly, this was more about a labor unity around the president and what he's accomplished so far. I think when he has meetings like this, it proves to be true what he said a long time, is that the White House is labor's house now. We talked about his accomplishments. We talked about whether it be keeping people employed with the American Recovery Plan, or putting more people to work with the Investment Act, and doing it with union jobs through the Workforce Empowerment Plan and other tools the federal government has. We need to get out there and sing that story and make sure that people know what he's accomplished, because there's a lot going on right now. The news is taken up with a lot of stuff, not a lot of great news internationally. But we have a really good story to tell in terms of what it means to what this White House and this administration has done for working people.
Yeah, right now everything is all about Ukraine, all about how horrible Vladimir Putin is. And welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. So, Madison Cawthorn. Evidently, Madison Cawthorn doesn't have a driver's license. And evidently, Madison Cawthorn was speeding again. Evidently, this is the third speeding ticket Madison Cawthorn has gotten in the last, couple months, 2 months, 3 months? Madison Cawthorn probably shouldn't be speeding. He got one for 89 and a 65, 87 and a 70. And now I guess this latest one could get him a I guess 20 days in jail is what they're saying. And good. Maybe that would be, maybe that would be something. Maybe that'd be something good for him. Maybe a little time away could be helpful. But this again is another one of those moments where you go, maybe not break the law. Oh, I know none of that law stuff actually applies to you. Never mind. Also, a New York State judge has ruled that the Smartmatic company, the folks that are claiming that Rudy and company, Fox and the rest of them defamed them. Well, that lawsuit for $2.7 billion with a B dollars can go forward. They're saying, because look, if you remember what I was saying when the whole kangaroo nonsense was going on, when you had the the Four Seasons landscaping event, and in the Gettysburg, kangaroo court, where they literally had Donald Trump on the phone for an hour testifying. And they brought all these people in making these fantastical claims of voter fraud. And I saw this and I heard this. And, I heard so-and-so tell me that they did this and all this stuff. And just made all these incredible claims. But never under oath. No one swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Didn't even bother to pretend to put their hand on the book that they all usually swear at. Nope, there was none of that. And I kept saying, why are they not bringing this into court? Why? Why when they get in front of that person wearing the dress, the robe? Why? Why would they not bring this in? If they had this evidence, if the guy who said, I saw them take the sticks, I saw them. If he truly saw it, why not put his hand on the Bible? I swear to tell the truth, but the truth. So help me God. If he really did see that, why did he testify in court? None of them did. None of this stuff happened. It was all lies, all BS, because nobody went into court to do it. Even Rudy didn't do it. As crazy as he is. As crazy as that other woman is, the Powell woman, as crazy as they are, none of them went into a court of law and made these claims. None of them. Why? Because they're not stupid. They think we are, because they went on that channel with the F and they made these wild claims, figuring that, hey, this company's not going to do anything about it. Well, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to sue them for $2.7 billion. And that channel that gave them the ability to do it, they're on the hook too. Because guess what? There was no rig. There was no theft. But here's the thing. The damage is done. We've already done so much damage to our electoral system that I don't know it can be undone. I had a conversation with somebody the other day who believes no election results ever. He believes nothing. Anything with a ballot, he does not believe it. Even if he sees the ballots himself, still doesn't believe it. I'm going, well, then what do you do? This is what the right has done to this country. This is what the moneyed interest, this is what creating a billionaire class with tons of resources and disposable income has done. This is why we need to tax the rich at a much higher rate. We need to go back to the Eisenhower tax code. We need to tax these people to where they're no longer billionaires and divide it back up amongst the working class, have good, decent wages again, where workers earn a good living. Their children have opportunities. We invest in schools so teachers don't have to go on strike. And my folks out in Minneapolis, I'm with you, my brothers and sisters. Keep up the great fight. And if you're in Minneapolis, by all means, stop by the picket line and say hello that you stand with those folks. If you've missed any of today's program, download the podcast. Do that wherever you get your podcast or at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.